Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story.
Subscribe, like, and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
You ever get booted out of your own family Christmas by your little sister while paying her rent? I know how wild that sounds, but trust me, it's not even the worst part. When I tell people the story, I always start there because it's the line that makes them pause, laugh nervously, and say, "Wait, what?" And yeah, I laughed too, at first. Not because it was funny, but because if I didn't laugh, I'd scream. It started the week before Thanksgiving. I was in the middle of a late client call, sipping on cold coffee and half listening to my accountant complain about delayed invoices, when a ping lit up my phone. A group chat I barely paid attention to, my mom, dad, Melissa, and me. Subject line: Christmas coordination. Christmas tree. I opened it, thinking it would be the usual passive-aggressive potluck schedule. Instead, it was a tidy little itinerary complete with times, dishes, locations, and sleepover arrangements. Everyone had a job. Melissa and Todd were bringing dessert. Mom was hosting dinner at her place. Cousin Eliza was in charge of games. But my name? Nowhere. At first, I thought maybe they just forgot to assign me something. Maybe there was a second message I missed. I scrolled. Nothing. I waited. No one followed up. I reread the thread 3 times before it hit me. There was no, "Hey Jake, are you coming?" Not even a passive, "Let us know if you can make it." Just a clean schedule that I wasn't part of. I stared at my screen for a while, trying to decide whether this was a mistake or an intentional snub. The longer I sat, the more it felt like the latter. And listen, I'm not the dramatic type. I'm not the guy who makes a scene or cries over group messages. But something about this felt different. Colder. Like a decision had been made behind my back, and this cheerful itinerary was just their way of letting me know I was officially out. I texted Mom privately. Just a casual, "Hey, saw the Christmas plans, want me to bring anything?" She replied 2 hours later with, "Oh, I thought you were doing your own thing this year. Didn't Melissa say you were busy?" That was when the pit in my stomach turned into something sharp. Because no, I never said I was busy. I never even had that conversation. And the fact that Melissa did? Well, that told me everything I needed to know. You ever get that moment when your brain just freezes? Like, your body's still functioning, but emotionally, you're watching yourself from outside, like some ghost hovering over your own life? That was me, sitting there in my living room, phone in hand, realizing my little sister had spoken on my behalf, and everyone just went with it. So, I called her. No texts. No passive-aggressive replies. I called her. She picked up like nothing was wrong. "Hey, Jakey." "What's up?" she chirped. Jakey. She hadn't called me that since we were kids, and she wanted something. I cut straight to it. "Did you tell Mom I wasn't coming for Christmas?" Silence. For a full 3 seconds. Then, well, I just thought, after everything, you might want some space. Everything? What everything? I asked her exactly that, and she sighed dramatically. "Look, Jake, you always make things so tense. And Todd really wants a calm holiday this year. So, we just figured, maybe sit this one out." And there it was. The truth, wrapped in a ribbon of fake concern and tied up with condescension. We figured. Who's we? Todd? The same guy who's been living rent-free in my house for the past year and a half? The same guy I helped get a job by putting in a word with a client? That Todd? I didn't even argue. There was no point. Melissa had already made herself the center of the holiday, and I'd apparently been voted off the island without even a warning. I hung up without saying goodbye and stared at the ceiling until my coffee went completely cold. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, maybe you're overreacting. Maybe it's not that deep. But ask yourself, what would you do if your own family just left you off the invite list without even telling you to your face? Because for me, it wasn't just about one missed holiday. It was the pattern, the history, the years of small slights, passive digs, and backhanded jokes at my expense. Melissa has always had a way of making herself the victim and me the villain. She cries and my parents jump. I speak up, and suddenly I'm the problem. So this time, I didn't fight. I didn't beg or plead or explain myself. Instead, I took out a notebook and started writing things down. Every bill, every payment, every favor, every time I'd quietly stepped up for her and Todd. Mortgage deferment during the pandemic. Utilities, groceries, Wi-Fi. Even that time I fixed their broken furnace because they couldn't afford the repairman. I filled the entire first page. And that's when the shift happened. I didn't get mad. I got precise. Because if I'm such a burden at Christmas, maybe they don't need my help the rest of the year either. But hey, that's just the beginning. You'll want to hear what happened when I stopped being their safety net. Turns out, calm holidays are a lot harder when the guy paying your bills decides he's done playing Santa. And trust me, I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. You ever notice how it's always the ones smiling the brightest that are usually pulling the strings behind your back? That's Melissa in a nutshell. Sweet on the surface, honey in her voice, but underneath it all, sharp as broken glass. After that group message fiasco, and after that ridiculous phone call where she said I needed space, I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was going on. Something orchestrated. Melissa didn't just make a casual suggestion. No, she'd planned this. A few days passed, and no one followed up. No concerned text from Mom, no awkward dad call pretending like he didn't know what was happening. Just silence. Like they were all waiting for the storm to pass. But I'm not a storm, I'm a ledger. And I remember things. Small things. Like the time Mom mysteriously stopped asking me to bring wine to dinner because Melissa's husband's sober journey required sensitivity. Never mind the fact that Todd was never sober, nor did he ever journey. He just didn't want to spend money, so water was his drink of choice. Or the time I showed up to Thanksgiving and found out they'd already eaten. We thought you weren't coming, Mom said, like I hadn't RSVP'd 2 weeks earlier. And those moments? I always brushed them off. Gave the benefit of the doubt. Told myself I was being sensitive or dramatic. But looking back now, it's like I've been walking through a hallway where someone kept quietly closing doors behind me. One by one, the space I had in my own family kept shrinking. And the person holding the doorknob every time? Melissa. So, I decided I needed to talk to my mother. Not text. Not call. In person. I drove to their house one rainy afternoon, unannounced, and knocked on the door like someone who still expected to be welcomed inside. She opened the door with a polite smile and just a flicker of guilt behind her eyes. She wasn't surprised to see me. That's how I knew she was expecting this conversation. We sat in the kitchen, the same one where I'd eaten cereal before school, learned to scramble eggs, fought with Melissa over Pop-Tarts, and who got the last chocolate chip pancake. But this time, it was quiet. Too quiet. And I wasn't a kid anymore. I just want to know the truth, I said. No theatrics. No raised voice. Did you not invite me, or did Melissa tell you not to? Mom stared at the steam rising off her coffee like it could answer for her. Then she sighed, slow and deliberate. It's better without Jake this year, she said, and the way she said it softly, like she was quoting someone else, told me everything. That's what Melissa said? I asked. She nodded, then added, she felt things might be calmer. Less tense. Was I ever tense? I asked, almost laughing. I bring pie. I clean up. I fix your thermostat. I sit in the corner and make small talk with Dad about football I don't watch. When have I ever caused drama? But she didn't answer. She just said the line that people use when they've chosen a side but don't want to admit it. We didn't want to choose sides, so we just didn't invite you. You know what that means, right? It means they chose. They just didn't want to be accountable for it. I left the coffee on the table and walked out. No yelling. No speech. I just left because staying would have meant accepting that I was the one disrupting things just by existing. And I wasn't going to do that anymore. In the car, I started thinking back over the past year. The subtle shifts. The moments that felt off but didn't raise alarms at the time. Like how Melissa kept bringing up old stories at family dinners, stories where I came off as the selfish one. The time I didn't loan her money in college. The time I forgot her birthday during my divorce. The time I moved into my own apartment and didn't tell her until a month later. She'd always mention them with a laugh, but there was venom underneath. She was rewriting history with a smile. And my parents? They let her. Maybe because they didn't want to lose her. Maybe because she made them feel needed, always playing the fragile one, always needing support, validation, attention. Meanwhile, I was the one who never asked for anything. Who handled my own problems. Who picked up the tab at brunch and quietly paid the plumber when their pipes burst last winter. But when you don't demand anything from people, they start thinking you don't need anything. Not respect. Not inclusion. Not even love. That was Melissa's master plan all along, turn me into the strong, distant one. The one who didn't show up emotionally. The one who didn't care. And the more she pushed that narrative, the more they believed it. Because it was easier than confronting her manipulations. Easier than dealing with the truth that their golden child was nothing more than a well-dressed parasite with a knack for drama. I went home that night and stared at the Christmas box I'd already pulled out of storage. Ornaments, old cards, a half-burned cinnamon candle from some Christmas past. And for the first time, I didn't feel nostalgic. I felt numb. And that numbness? It was fuel. Because this wasn't about a holiday anymore. This was about power. And I was done pretending I didn't have any. You want calm, Melissa? You want a Christmas without drama? Great. Let's see how calm you are when the heat's off, the bills are due, and the rent fairy vanishes into thin air. Because I'd just made a decision. Next Christmas? She could host it anywhere she liked. Just not under my roof. If there's one thing I've learned about people who play the victim for a living, it's that they're always the first to complain about the weight of the crown, especially when they're wearing it rent-free. So let's rewind a bit, back before the Christmas fiasco, before the group text betrayal, and even before Melissa decided to rewrite family history in her own squeaky clean handwriting. Let's talk about generosity, or more specifically mine. Because apparently I've been generous enough to be taken advantage of, but not quite generous enough to be included at the dinner table. It all started about 2 years ago, during one of those economic dips where everyone you know suddenly becomes a financial guru or a professional victim of the system. Todd, Melissa's fiancé, boyfriend at the time, had just lost another job, his third in a year, which he blamed on toxic management and a lack of creative freedom, even though the job was in warehouse logistics. Melissa called me, voice trembling just enough to sound believable, and asked if I had any leads, any opportunities, or if, God forbid, I had a place they could crash temporarily. Now, I should have known better. I really should have. But guilt has a funny way of sounding like family, and before I knew it, I was handing them the keys to my second property, a rental on the edge of town that was supposed to be part of my retirement plan. I told myself it was temporary. 3 months, maybe 4. Just enough time for Todd to find something steady and for Melissa to regroup. I drew up a simple lease, left most of it blank except for the essentials, and told them, pay what you can just keep the place in decent shape. You already know how that went. Fast forward 18 months later, and not only had they never paid a cent in rent, they'd somehow managed to turn my place into a shrine for secondhand furniture, neon beer signs, and one of those giant beanbags that somehow takes up more space than an actual bed. The walls were repainted, poorly, in what I can only describe as YouTube gray, and the original hardwood floors were now partially covered in laminate sticker tiles that were peeling at the edges like a sunburn. Utilities? On me. Internet? Also me. Todd needed fast Wi-Fi for his podcast, which, by the way, had exactly 11 listeners, most of whom were probably bots or bored high schoolers trolling SoundCloud. Every month, I watched the bills roll in electric, water, gas, and every month I told myself, it's fine, it's family, this is temporary. But then, one night at dinner, months before the Christmas cutoff, Melissa dropped a line that hit me like a punch disguised as a hug. She said, "It's amazing how family helps family, you know? I mean, we're just lucky you understand that we don't owe each other anything." That line, that exact combination of words. I remember it clearly because it stayed with me for days like a bad aftertaste. We don't owe each other anything. Funny, isn't it? When you're the one covering the bills, fixing the boiler, and footing the grocery deliveries, you'd think "oh" might enter the conversation at least once. But no, because in Melissa's world, generosity isn't a gift. It's a requirement. A given. A quiet tax paid by the ones who don't scream when the check comes. So after the Christmas slight, after the "we just didn't want to choose sides" excuse, I opened my files. Not metaphorically, literally. I opened my old laptop and dug through my folders until I found the scanned copy of the lease agreement I'd written up back in the beginning. And there it was, plain as day, my name as the owner, my signature on the bottom, and one little unchecked box next to the clause that allowed subletting. In other words, I still held the cards. All of them. They weren't tenants with rights. They weren't on any formal rental agreement that gave them legal standing. They were guests. And guests, as it turns out, can be uninvited. I didn't act on it yet. I just sat with it, let it simmer like a stew you don't rush because the flavor's still deepening. I started documenting everything: receipts, utility bills, repair costs. I made a spreadsheet because spite runs smoother on Excel. And every time I got another Venmo request from Melissa for cleaning supplies or joint groceries, I added it to the list with a new column titled Nerve. But the thing that broke the last bit of restraint I had was a message from my mom, one of those chain-type forwards she loves to send, a wholesome little nugget of passive aggression wrapped in faux wisdom. It read, "Sometimes the people who give the most are the ones who get appreciated the least. Be kind to them." No punctuation. Just vibes. So I screenshotted it and saved it next to the spreadsheet because irony tastes best when served cold with receipts on the side. You know, people talk about revenge like it has to be loud. A screaming match. A dramatic confrontation in the rain. But me? I prefer revenge like I prefer my coffee. Slow drip, no sugar, and just bitter enough to keep you up at night. And the first step? Realizing that kindness without boundaries isn't kindness at all. It's enabling. It's fuel for people who want to take without giving and guilt you into silence while they do it. So I opened the lease, printed a copy, and laid it flat on my desk. I circled the ownership line in red ink. Just one little detail. But it changed everything. There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels surgical, clean, and cold, like the moment right before a scalpel touches skin. That's the kind of silence I felt as I sat in my truck, parked just around the corner from the house that had become their little kingdom of entitlement, waiting for the perfect moment to walk in and take back what was mine. I timed everything perfectly because, of course, I had. Melissa's Instagram stories made it embarrassingly easy to track their movements. She'd posted 5 clips from the ugly sweater party they were attending across town, complete with duck-face selfies, a close-up of some overpriced peppermint cocktail, and Todd pretending to dance with a plastic reindeer. They were gone, drunk, and oblivious. Exactly what I needed. I waited until the 7th story went live, a shaky pan across the crowd with "All I Want for Christmas Is You" playing in the background, before stepping out of the truck and walking up to the front door of my own house. I didn't hesitate. I didn't second guess. I pulled a new set of keys from my jacket pocket and slid the fresh lock cylinder into place with the same slow, methodical focus you'd use to lace up boots before a long march. Click. Twist. Done. Changing the locks took under 10 minutes, but the sense of satisfaction that bloomed in my chest could have filled an hour. I wasn't angry anymore, not the kind that makes you yell or break things. No, this was something different. This was cold, resolved anger, the kind that simmers for weeks and then lands with precise intention. I had spent too long being the one who swallowed the discomfort, who shrugged off the small slights and let the big ones slide because that's just family, but that line had officially expired. Melissa and Todd had made it clear. I wasn't family, not really. I was a walking wallet, a backup plan with a pulse, and they'd played that card long enough. Once the new lock was in place, I walked around the house and checked each window, every door, even the back gate. I wasn't being paranoid, I was being thorough. I didn't want them slipping in later like raccoons returning to a dumpster. I needed them to understand that the door they'd slammed shut on me emotionally had now been matched with a real, physical one. And this one didn't open for free. On the kitchen counter, I left a printed note, not handwritten, not sentimental, just printed in plain black ink on standard white paper. It read, "Effective immediately, your occupancy of this property is terminated. Please contact a lawyer if you believe you have any rights to contest this." Spoiler, you don't. Beneath it, I placed a copy of the lease with the relevant sections highlighted and initialed. I didn't sign it with my name. I signed it the landlord. Before I left, I pulled the final string, the utilities. I'd already contacted each provider earlier in the week, claimed the accounts, and scheduled everything for disconnection. Water, gas, power, and internet all timed for exactly midnight on Christmas Eve. Not because I wanted to be dramatic, but because symbolism matters. Midnight. When Christmas turns from anticipation into reality. When all the fake warmth fades and the truth starts to creep in. They wanted a holiday without me? They'd get one. Just a bit colder, a little darker, and a whole lot quieter than expected. As I walked back to my truck, I felt a strange lightness settle into my chest. Not joy, not triumph. Just relief. Like I'd finally pulled a splinter that had been festering for too long. The kind of relief that comes not from winning, but from finally stopping the game altogether. When I got home, I didn't pour a drink or celebrate. I plugged in my phone, opened the message thread with Melissa, and blocked her. Then I did the same with Todd. One tap each. Clean. Surgical. Silent. For a few minutes, I let myself imagine the moment they'd come back from the party, giddy and tipsy, fumbling at the front door only to realize the key no longer turned. I imagined Todd trying to kick it in, Melissa pulling out her phone, dialing frantically as the porch light flickered out behind them. And then, with that image still playing in my mind, I unblocked them. I didn't do it to be merciful. I did it because I wanted them to feel the panic. I wanted them to blow up my phone, to try every tactic, begging, blaming, bargaining, only to hear nothing but silence in return. I wanted them to realize, fully and completely, that the guy they dismissed from Christmas was also the guy who held the power lines and the water valves and the Wi-Fi password. That maybe, just maybe, they should have invited the landlord to dinner before deciding he wasn't welcome at the table. That night, I slept like a stone. No buzzing thoughts, no mental reruns of family drama. Just the kind of sleep that comes when the scales finally tip back to balance. And when I woke up on Christmas morning, the first notification on my phone was a missed call from Melissa, followed by 3 from Todd. Then a text that just read, "What did you do?" I didn't reply. I made coffee, took a long shower, played music loud enough to drown out any doubts. And when my phone started vibrating again, I picked it up, smiled faintly, and set it back down without answering. Because the game had changed. And for once, I wasn't the one on the losing end of a family decision. The first call came at exactly 8:30 Christmas morning, like clockwork, like some twisted little gift from the universe wrapped in entitlement and tied with a bow of rage. My phone lit up with Melissa's name, and even before I answered, because yes, I answered, I knew she'd be screaming. Not crying. Not apologizing. Screaming because that's how people like Melissa operate when the world dares to remind them it doesn't actually revolve around their feelings. I let it ring twice before sliding my thumb across the screen, just long enough to make her wonder if I would pick up, just short enough to avoid voicemail. I didn't say hello. I didn't need to. She launched into it like a cannonball, voice shrill and cracking from whatever sugar-plastered cocktails she'd had the night before. "What the hell is wrong with you, Jake? Are you actually insane?" We came home, and everything was locked. The lights were off. The heat was off. The door wouldn't open. Do you think that's funny? Do you think freezing your sister out of her home on Christmas is a joke? I could have cut her off. I could have yelled back or explained or defended myself, but I didn't. I let her rant like a child mid-tantrum, pacing circles in her own drama. When she finally stopped, out of breath more than anything else, I just said, calm and steady, "Did you get the note?" Her pause was deafening. That wasn't real. She finally snapped, trying to sound sure, but the edge of uncertainty in her voice betrayed her. "You can't just do that. We live there. That's our home." "No," I replied, with the same patience you'd use to explain gravity to someone convinced they could fly. "You stayed there. You never lived there. And you never paid for it." "I did." She started again, louder this time, but I was already done listening. I held the phone away from my ear and let her voice become background noise while I sipped coffee and looked out the window at the snow piling on the edge of the yard. The silence between her sentences started to stretch, and I knew she was checking to see if I was even still on the line. When I finally brought the phone back, I kept my voice calm and distant. "Merry Christmas, Melissa." Then I hung up. The next text came 5 minutes later, and this time it was Todd. A full paragraph of passive-aggressive desperation, laced with just enough faux humility to make it clear he'd practiced it like a monologue in front of a mirror. He called me bro twice, said we didn't mean anything by it, and even tried the classic guilt lever. "Your parents are really upset, man. Can't we just talk like family?" I didn't answer. Because the moment you remind someone what family means only after you've burned the bridge, you're not asking for reconciliation, you're asking for access. And Todd? He never wanted family. He wanted sponsorship. A quiet ATM with a familiar last name. I muted both of them for the day. Not blocked, just muted. I wanted to see the messages roll in, not respond to them. I wanted to witness the unraveling without having to offer commentary. There was something beautiful in the quiet that followed, no obligation, no one knocking on the door needing something, no thinly veiled guilt trips over dinner tables and birthdays. Just peace, real and uninterrupted. Later that afternoon, I was flipping through some old work folders when I stumbled across a reference letter I'd written over a year ago. It was addressed to a boutique media firm in the city, Todd's current job, the one he always bragged about. The one that finally saw his potential. I remembered the email chain that led to that offer. A friend of mine in HR had reached out, asking if I knew anyone decent for a junior producer role. I'd hesitated back then, but ultimately decided to help. Because Todd was family. Because Melissa had asked. Because I thought that's what decent brothers did. Funny how those decisions come back around. I found the email thread, reread my own words, and marveled at the lies I'd told to help him land that gig. Creative, responsible, driven. I must have been drunk or delusional. Then I opened a new tab and typed a short, polite message to the same HR contact. "Hi Ellie, hope you're doing well and the holidays are treating you kindly. I just wanted to flag something regarding a previous referral I sent your way, Todd L. There's been some ongoing behavior that doesn't align with what I thought he brought to the table. Thought it was only right to loop you in, given I put my name on the line. Let me know if you'd like more details. Warm regards, Jake Callahan." I didn't even hesitate before clicking send. It wasn't revenge. Not really. It was just clarity. If he wanted to keep reaping the benefits of my name, he'd have to start acting like he respected it. That night, I poured myself a drink, something aged, something earned, and sat in the quiet of my living room while snow dusted the porch and my phone buzzed silently from the counter. The messages were stacking up. More from Melissa, more from Todd, one from Mom that just said, "Please don't do this," without specifying what this meant. But the best message didn't come until midnight. From Todd. "You cost me my job." 6 words. No punctuation. All impact. I stared at the screen for a long minute, then smiled, took another sip, and set the phone face down on the table. Maybe I did cost him the job. But he cost me Christmas first. And fair is fair. It didn't take long for my parents to get involved, though honestly, I thought they might have waited longer, given how willing they were to stay quiet when it actually mattered. But there's a special kind of urgency that creeps into the voices of people who realize too late that their favorite child might be in real trouble, and that the one they overlooked is the only person holding the life raft. The first call came from my father, Rick, and I have to admit, it caught me off guard. He's not the type to call unless it's for birthdays or car troubles, and even then, it usually starts with "your mother asked me to." So when I saw his name light up my phone 3 days after Christmas, I already knew it wasn't a casual check-in. I let it ring. Not to be petty, but because I needed the silence. I needed to remind myself that just because someone finally picks up the phone doesn't mean they're ready to listen. When I finally answered, I kept my voice even, not cold, just neutral. "Hey, Dad." He jumped in immediately, not with a greeting, but with that trademark tone of disappointed confusion that somehow makes you feel like the problem, even when you're holding all the facts. "Jake, what's going on here? Your sister is hysterical. Your mother hasn't slept. We just want to understand, why are you doing this?" There it was. The pivot. Not what happened, not how did it get to this, but why are you doing this, as if this entire situation had fallen out of the sky and landed in their laps, completely divorced from years of manipulation and silence and quiet tolerance. I waited a beat before responding, because I wanted to make sure my voice didn't carry anything but clarity. "I'm doing this," I said slowly, "because I was left off the Christmas list like I was dead weight. Because I was used like an ATM for 2 years without even the courtesy of acknowledgement. And because every time I tried to set a boundary, Melissa found a way to turn it into a betrayal." There was a pause, long enough for me to imagine him handing the phone to Judy, which is exactly what he did. "Jake." Her voice was soft, breathy, like she'd been crying or trying to sound like she had. "We didn't mean for it to get like this. You're blowing everything out of proportion. Can't we just talk about this like adults?" I took a breath and leaned back into the chair by the window, watching the snow melt slowly off the porch roof. "You had a chance to talk like adults," I said, "back when you all decided, without speaking to me, that I wasn't welcome for Christmas. You had a chance when Melissa started twisting history to make herself the victim, and you just nodded along. I didn't hear from either of you until I pulled the plug on the free ride. So tell me, are you upset because you miss me, or because Melissa finally ran out of favors?" The line was silent. No denial. Just breathing. Then came the gaslight. "You've always been so reactive," Judy said. "You carry things so heavily, Jake. We thought you'd understand, that you'd be the bigger person. You're better than this." And that was the moment I realized just how deep the delusion went. The idea that because I didn't explode, because I handled things quietly, because I was the stable one, I was expected to absorb the damage without complaint. To always be the bigger person meant always being the silent one. So I said what had been sitting on the edge of my tongue for years. "Am I better? Or just quieter?" That hit differently. She knew it too. I could hear it in the way her breath caught, the way she started to speak and then stopped. Because the truth was, I had been quieter. I had eaten every slight, every exclusion, every guilt trip disguised as kindness. And they had mistaken my restraint for consent. Melissa's threatening legal action, Judy finally said, a last-ditch effort to regain control. She says you illegally evicted them, that you tampered with their home. I actually laughed, not a big, cruel laugh, but a short, exhausted one. The kind that comes from knowing you've already outmaneuvered every argument being thrown at you. "I'd love to see her try," I said. "Because unlike her, I keep records. I've got the lease agreement with no tenant signatures. I've got proof of every bill I paid. I've got text messages, emails, voicemail logs. You know what I don't have? A single receipt from her or Todd showing they contributed even a dime. So, if she wants to take this to court, I'll bring coffee and popcorn." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse or insult or throw blame like grenades. I just laid it out, simple and irrefutable, like facts on a chalkboard. And that, more than anything, is what left them speechless. "Please," Judy said, soft again, like she thought volume would soften consequence. "Can't we just fix this?" I paused for a long time, not for effect, just to let her words settle, to feel whether or not they carried any weight. "We can," I said. "But not like this. Not with manipulation. Not with guilt. And not if fixing it just means going back to how things were." Then I ended the call. Not out of anger, but because the conversation was finished. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't willing to extend the bridge if all they were going to do was light the match. The next day, a legal-looking email arrived in my inbox from someone calling themselves a family mediation consultant. It was laughable. The subject line read urgent concerns, unlawful eviction of family member. I replied with a single scanned document, the unsigned lease with Melissa's and Todd's names missing from every line that mattered, and a PDF titled Invoice History, 24 months of property expenses. No response came after that. And that, truly, was the most peaceful silence I've ever received. The funny thing about extended families is that they all come with that one sacred space where secrets go to die, or more accurately, where lies go to thrive under the warm glow of filtered vacation photos and passive-aggressive birthday wishes. For ours, it was the family group chat, a dusty old thread on Facebook Messenger that had once been useful for organizing reunions and splitting potluck assignments, but over the years had devolved into an endless scroll of forwarded memes, vague prayer requests, and Melissa's overly curated life updates. Every holiday season, it came back to life like some digital zombie, briefly animated by distant aunts and awkward cousins pretending we were all still as close as we'd been when we were kids playing tag in Grandma's backyard. I hadn't posted in it in over a year, maybe more, mostly because I couldn't stomach the performative nonsense anymore. Melissa had practically claimed it as her own personal PR feed, photo after photo of her and Todd decorating cookies, volunteering at some shelter once a year just for the optics, captioned with lines like "grateful to give back" or "love is the reason for the season," which made me want to drive my head through drywall. She never missed a chance to mention how blessed they were to have a home, even though the home wasn't theirs. It was mine. But after weeks of them painting me as some unhinged villain, and after the legal threats fizzled into radio silence, I realized something. They had spent so long shaping the narrative, controlling how the family saw me, that no one else had heard a single damn word of my side. It wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about burning down the mythology they'd built with nothing but fake smiles and filtered lies. So I did what Melissa never expected. I gave them receipts. I spent a full hour one quiet Sunday morning combing through my files. Not because I needed to prove anything to myself, I'd already done that, but because sometimes the truth is more powerful when you let it speak without commentary. I screenshotted utility bills with my name on every account. I clipped sections of the lease. I grabbed emails confirming the rent-free arrangement and saved the text where Melissa had said, "We'll get you next month, promise," for over a year. I even pulled voicemail transcripts of Todd joking about how lucky they were to have a landlord who doesn't believe in rent. Then, without preamble or warning, I opened the family group chat. The last message had been 2 weeks ago, Melissa, posting a picture of the Christmas tree she'd designed, with some nauseating caption about minimalist joy. No one had responded to it, probably because most of the family was burned out from her endless need for approval. So when my first message popped in, it landed like a meteor. No caption. No explanation. Just 30 images. Screenshot after screenshot. Page after page. Dates, dollar amounts, itemized breakdowns of the money I'd sunk into keeping them afloat. I didn't write a single sentence to frame it, no sarcastic commentary or dramatic declarations. Just truth, raw and unemotional, dropped into the same thread that Melissa had been using as her personal stage for years. The silence was immediate, but not for long. First came the typing bubbles, 1, 2, then 5 at once. Then came the messages. "What is all this? Wait, Jake, you paid for all that? Is this why they moved out? Then the big one from my cousin Rachel. We always knew something was off. She never worked but somehow had everything. This explains a lot. After that, it snowballed. A few others chimed in. Stories emerged. One cousin said Melissa had once borrowed money from her and never paid it back. Another said she'd offered to rent their Airbnb for a weekend, then ghosted them on payment. It was like lifting the lid on a long-sealed pot. Everyone had a story, but no one had wanted to be the first to speak. I didn't reply to any of them. I just watched. Because this wasn't about vindication. This was about exposure. This was about showing that the golden child's shine came from light she stole from everyone else. Eventually, Melissa saw the messages. It must have taken her a moment to process the full weight of what I'd done, because she didn't reply right away. But when she did, it was as theatrical as I expected. She posted a long, paragraph-style message, dramatic, tear-soaked language about betrayal, about how this was a personal family matter that should have never been aired like dirty laundry. She called it cruel. She accused me of publicly humiliating her and said I had weaponized generosity. She asked how I could do this to her on a platform that included elderly relatives and church-going cousins. And even then, I said nothing. Because the truth didn't need a spokesperson. Melissa tried to regain control, like she always did, shifting blame, painting herself as the victim of a cold-hearted brother with an axe to grind. But this time, it didn't land. Not the way she wanted. Because people weren't just seeing what I posted, they were remembering. All the little things. All the times Melissa had needed help or understanding or a short-term loan that never came back. All the years she'd played the martyr in a game only she knew the rules to. And for once, they weren't applauding. They were quiet, reflective, maybe even ashamed. A few of them messaged me privately, cousins I hadn't spoken to in ages. Hey man, sorry it took this to see what was happening. I always wondered how she could afford those trips. She made it sound like you were the problem. I didn't respond to most of them, just read the messages, nodded to myself, and let the silence hang in the space where explanations used to live. I didn't owe anyone a justification anymore. Not when the facts spoke louder than anything I could say. That night, as I sat with a glass of wine and watched snow fall against the dim porch light, I thought about what came next. Not revenge. Not another move. Just stillness. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't shout. It's finally letting them hear the silence after the storm. The voicemail came just before New Year's, tucked between a digital receipt from the grocery store and an auto-generated reminder that my next dental cleaning was due in March. I wasn't expecting anything more, not really. By then, the messages had mostly stopped. The group chat had gone quiet again, like a balloon deflated by one too many pricks of truth, and even Melissa had gone radio silent after her last public declaration of victimhood failed to catch traction. But there it was, one little red notification at the top of my screen, one more attempt to pull me back into the circle I'd finally stepped out of. It was from my mother, of course. Not Rick. He'd probably decided long ago that if a conversation required more than 5 minutes or moral clarity, he wasn't interested. No, it was Judy's voice that played when I pressed the button, soft and breaking in places, like she'd rehearsed it and still couldn't get the lines out without shaking. Jake, I don't know how we got here. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and maybe you won't even listen to this whole thing, but your sister's going through a rough patch. She's not doing well. Everything's upside down. I think she made some mistakes, but she's still your sister. And I don't know how to fix any of this. I just miss when we were all together. Then a pause. And then, quieter still. Please don't shut the door forever. Please don't make me choose between my children. And that was it. No explanation. No apology. No accountability. Just hairs and carefully chosen words designed to soften edges that had already been worn smooth by years of erosion. She hadn't called to fix anything. She'd called to reset the clock, to pretend that if we all just stopped talking about what happened, we could pretend it hadn't. But I wasn't interested in pretending anymore. I walked into the kitchen, barefoot, the hardwood floor cool beneath my feet, and poured myself a fresh cup of coffee. The voicemail still lingered on the screen. I stared at it for a moment, that little gray waveform frozen in time, the echo of her voice still humming in the back of my skull. Then I tapped the screen once, gently, like brushing away dust, and deleted it. No second thoughts. No replay. Just gone. I didn't need it. I already knew what it said. You see, there's something strange that happens after the storm, the part no one really talks about. Everyone gets so fixated on the explosion, the fallout, the drama, the shock. But no one prepares you for the silence. And not the hollow, lonely kind. I mean the deep, full silence that fills a room when all the noise that doesn't belong to you finally fades. The first few days after everything came to a head, I thought I'd feel guilty, thought I'd second-guess the decisions I made or regret pulling the pin on a family that had, in its own dysfunctional way, always kept itself together through denial. But the truth was, I didn't feel bad. I felt clear. The air in my house was cleaner. My phone no longer buzzed with obligation. My mind was quieter, and my chest didn't carry that tight, invisible pressure that had been there so long I didn't even notice it until it was gone. I'd spent so much of my life bending around the needs of people who mistook kindness for currency and silence for consent, that I'd forgotten what it meant to simply exist without owing anyone a damn thing. I didn't block my mother after the voicemail. I didn't call her back either. I let the line stay open, not as a gesture of forgiveness, but as a monument to boundaries. She could speak into the void all she wanted. I just wasn't going to carry her words anymore. As for Melissa, I heard through Rachel, because of course cousins talk, that she and Todd had moved back in with one of his relatives in another state. Apparently, she was taking time to heal and rebuilding her life, which is PR speak for trying to scrub the egg off her face without admitting she ever dropped the carton. I didn't need to know the details. I didn't wish her harm, but I wasn't going to send her peace offerings either. If she wanted to paint me as the villain in her next chapter, she could. I was done auditioning for roles in a play I didn't write. I took down the Christmas lights a few days later, earlier than usual. There was something therapeutic about winding them back into their box, knowing I hadn't turned them on once. No big tree, no awkward family photo, no lukewarm turkey and forced laughter. Just me, a fireplace, good scotch, and the kind of stillness that comes from surviving something ugly without letting it rot you from the inside out. I spent New Year's Eve alone by choice. No parties, no countdowns, no resolutions. I didn't need to promise myself change. I had already made it. I sat on the porch with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, watching the neighbors light fireworks in the distance, little bursts of color flickering in a sky too big to hold them. And I smiled. Not the forced, show your teeth kind of smile people give to cameras, but a real one, quiet and unbothered. For the first time in years, I spent Christmas alone. And it felt like I finally belonged somewhere.